Hey mystery lovers. I'm just here to haunt you with some creepy stories that'll send chills down your spine. Before we start, hit subscribe. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's get started.
It was supposed to be a simple escape, a break from the chaos of life. Just me, my cozy cabin nestled in the mountains, and a few days to clear my head after months of relentless turmoil. The property had a rugged charm, bought from miners who had long abandoned their search for gold. The remnants of their work, including the gaping maw of a so-called mine, added a unique, almost haunting character to the area. The storm hit the night before I planned to leave. Not just any storm, this was the kind of deluge that turned roads into rivers and left me stranded. My makeshift power setup had failed, leaving me without electricity, and my phone was a glorified paperweight by then. I was cut off, but oddly, not completely upset. I had enough supplies and, despite the inconvenience, found solace in the untamed beauty the rainstorm left behind. When the sun returned, I decided to explore and capture the lush aftermath with my Polaroid camera. The forest was breathtaking, vibrant with shades of green that seemed almost otherworldly. The canopy shielded me from the worst of the rain's lingering dampness, and the broken branches littering the trail, though odd, added an eerie charm. Yet, as I ventured deeper, the silence felt heavier. Hours slipped by, and the encroaching dusk reminded me it was time to head back. Before turning around, I had a fleeting, impulsive thought: why not take a photo to remember this strange, rain-soaked day? I set up my camera on a mossy rock, activated the flash and timer, and stepped back. That's when it happened. The crack of splitting wood was my only warning. Pain exploded in my head as something struck me hard. Dazed and half-blinded, I barely registered the grip tightening around my ankle, dragging me violently onto my stomach. My heart thundered in my chest as I kicked and clawed, but the thing, whatever it was, held firm. Then, there was a flash of blinding light. For a split second, the world froze. The sound of the Polaroid ejecting its film echoed in the stillness, cutting through the ringing in my ears. My captor, man, beast, or nightmare, released me as suddenly as it had attacked. I scrambled backward, my hands trembling as I stared at it. It was humanoid, but wrong. Its proportions were off, and its face was a grotesque mask of shadow and bone. Yet it didn't move. It stood there, utterly still, like a life-size doll caught mid-motion. My camera sat untouched on the rock, the freshly printed photo lying on the damp earth. I couldn't resist. Heart pounding, I reached for the Polaroid with shaky hands. My breath caught as I turned it over. There I was in the frame, standing in the clearing. And behind me, its long, spindly arms reaching, its hollow eyes glaring, was the thing. I didn't sleep that night. The roads are still flooded, and the storm threatens to return. I've barricaded myself in the cabin, but I know it's out there. Watching. Waiting. The ringing in my head slowly subsided, giving way to the sharp, icy grip of fear as I finally comprehended the nightmare before me. It resembled a human, or at least something that might have been one, long ago. But it was wrong. Its gaunt frame was stretched and contorted, skin so thin and pale it seemed translucent, revealing every sinew and bone beneath. Its ribs jutted sharply, like the bars of a cage, and its hands. Too long, too bony, one stretched outward, trembling, as though trying to shield its face. But its face. God, its face. A twisted mockery of humanity, like someone had tried and failed to sculpt a skull from clay. Cracks ran across the surface like dried mud, and the jagged lines of its cheekbones seemed to cut into its own sagging flesh. Its eyes, once human, perhaps, were dull but luminous, filled with an eerie, hollow light that seemed to pierce through me. Its mouth was worse. A grotesque smile stretched far too wide, lined with jagged teeth that gleamed as they clenched a piece of me, my calf. My stomach churned as the realization struck. This thing had bitten me, torn a piece of flesh clean off, and still held it between its bloodied teeth. I should have run. I wanted to run. But my legs screamed in agony, the torn flesh sending jolts of pain through my body with every attempt to move. My camera sat there on the rock, and I knew, the flash had done this. It had frozen the thing in place, stunned it somehow. That camera was the only thing keeping me alive. Using a stick for balance, I limped toward the camera, each step feeling like an eternity. My breath hitched when I saw it, a twitch. The creature's outstretched hand, once so still, was inching forward. Slow, deliberate, reaching for the camera. Panic surged through me. I couldn't let it take my only defense. I ignored the fire in my leg, the fear clawing at my chest, and snatched the camera before stumbling back onto the trail. My vision blurred, my steps faltering as the world around me seemed to close in. The forest, once vibrant and alive, now loomed like a suffocating tunnel of darkness. Behind me, a sound, wood cracking, faint but unmistakable. I turned sharply, scanning the trees. And then I saw it. A shadow, a shape, moving with unnatural speed through the branches. It was above me now, crouched low, its hollow eyes scanning the ground. I froze, clutching the camera like a lifeline. It was hunting me, its every movement deliberate, patient, calculated. The stalemate stretched for what felt like hours. Darkness swallowed the forest as the clouds smothered the moon, leaving only the faint glow of its eyes as a beacon of terror. Then, with a sharp, guttural growl, it darted away, disappearing into the shadows. I thought it was over, until I heard a faint thud behind me. A branch. Just a branch. Relief washed over me, but the realization hit too late. The sound had given me away. It was coming. Fast. The cracking of wood closed in, a frenzy of movement from the trees above. I stumbled, pressing my back against the nearest trunk, raising the camera. My heart was pounding so hard it drowned out the chaos around me. A flash. A scream. My hand moved before my mind could catch up, the photo ejecting with that familiar mechanical sound. But I didn't stop to look at it. The creature didn't fall this time. Its claw-like hand seized my shoulder, nails digging into my skin as it yanked me forward. Pain exploded, but I twisted, swinging the camera with every ounce of strength left in me. The flash went off again, blinding us both. For a moment, the world stood still. I pried myself free, collapsing to the ground. My chest heaved, my leg throbbed, and as I looked up, I saw it. Its face inches from mine, mouth open in a soundless scream, teeth dripping with blood, my blood. Its empty eyes locked onto me, and I knew this was far from over. I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my veins as I stumbled forward, each step dragging me closer to my cabin, closer to salvation, or so I hoped. The glow of its eyes had vanished, but the forest felt alive with menace, every shadow pregnant with the promise of its return. The rain soaked through my clothes, chilling me to the bone, and every muscle in my body screamed for rest. I couldn't ignore the fiery pain in my leg any longer. If I didn't stop, I'd collapse right there on the trail. I found shelter under a gnarled tree just off the path, its low-hanging branches offering a modicum of cover. The bark was damp and rough against my back as I slid down, trying to steady my ragged breathing. My fingers trembled as I tore at the fabric of my jeans, fashioning a crude bandage for the bloody mess of my leg. The wound throbbed with each heartbeat, but I bit down on my lip and forced myself to keep going. The camera sat heavy in my pocket, my only lifeline. As I leaned my head back against the tree, I froze. Two faint orbs glowed through the darkness, unblinking, watching me. My breath hitched, and my hand darted to the camera. I fumbled, pulling it free and snapping a photo. The flash lit up the woods, stark and unnatural, burning the image into my retinas. The eyes vanished. I didn't even have time to register relief. A shadow moved, a blur from the corner of my eye. Before I could react, the creature came from behind, slamming into me like a freight train. Its skeletal fingers wrapped around my arms, pinning me to the ground with inhuman strength. My screams were swallowed by the storm as it leaned in, its malformed face inches from mine, blood dripping from its teeth. I could smell it, rot, damp earth, and death. My pulse pounded as I waited for it to end me, but instead, it seized my head in one of its grotesque hands and slammed me into the ground. Everything went black. I woke to cold stone beneath me, the sharp pain in the back of my skull pulling me from unconsciousness. My body ached, my leg throbbed, and the metallic taste of blood lingered in my mouth. I tried to sit up, but the suffocating darkness pressed in on me from all sides. Stretching out my hands, I felt coarse rock walls, jagged and damp. The air was heavy, thick with decay. Then I felt it, warmth. My fingers brushed something rough and sticky. Fur. My stomach turned as I realized what I was touching, a dead animal. My hands roamed further, feeling another, and another, until I found myself surrounded by a grotesque pile of corpses. Deer, rabbits, even the mangled remains of a fox, all of them with their skulls caved in, a grim testament to the creature's habits. My breath came in shallow gasps. It had dragged me here, to its den. I reached into my coat, praying to feel the familiar plastic of the camera. Relief washed over me as my fingers closed around it, but the moment was short-lived. A sound, faint but unmistakable, scratching. My blood ran cold. It was here. Panic surged, and I did the only thing I could think of. I buried myself beneath the corpses, gagging as the stench of death enveloped me. I covered my face with the wet, slimy fur of a deer, trying to suppress the sound of my breath. The scratching grew louder, closer. Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl, followed by slow, deliberate footsteps. It was pacing, searching. I stayed as still as I could, every second stretching into eternity. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, and I fought the urge to retch as warm blood soaked through my clothes. It passed by me, its uneven gait echoing in the confined space. Then, silence. I waited, counting each agonizing second until I was sure it was gone. Carefully, I slid out from my grotesque hiding spot, my movements painstakingly slow to avoid making noise. I felt my way through the cavern, guided only by the faintest wisp of air. A breeze. It was my only hope. I crawled through narrow tunnels, my hands raw from the jagged stone. The air grew fresher, the darkness lifting ever so slightly. And then, I saw it, a faint light, soft and inviting. My cabin. It stood there like a beacon, promising safety, weapons, hope. For the first time in what felt like hours, I allowed myself to breathe. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. It would come for me again. It always did. I don't know how long I had been lying there on the cold stone floor of the cave. The rain outside hadn't let up, a relentless curtain of water pounding the earth as if the forest itself were weeping. Then, from somewhere deeper in the cave, came a sound. A scream. It tore through the silence, raw and guttural, reverberating off the stone walls like a death knell. My stomach turned. It knew. It knew I had escaped. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the searing pain in my leg, and limped toward the faint sliver of moonlight at the cave's mouth. The wind outside howled as I burst into the storm, rain stabbing my skin like needles. My cabin wasn't far, just a desperate sprint away, but each step felt like an eternity. I half ran, half crawled, slamming into the door and throwing it open. Once inside, I bolted the locks, shoved furniture against the entrance, and checked the old, single window. Everything was secure. The power had returned while I was out there, and I silently thanked whatever cosmic force hadn't forsaken me entirely. The cabin was small, built more for practicality than comfort, but tonight it felt like a fortress. I dug through the cluttered drawers, finding my rifle and a box of rusty foothold traps I hadn't used in years. They weren't much, but they were all I had. I set them up near the doors and at strategic points inside the cabin. Then, I waited. The fire crackled in the hearth, its warm glow a fragile shield against the malevolent darkness outside. But even its comfort was fleeting. As the first sounds began, a scuttling, soft at first, like leaves brushing against the roof. The noise grew louder, faster, and soon, it sounded as though the creature was crawling over every inch of the cabin, testing for weaknesses. My chest tightened when I heard it pause at the chimney. I gripped the rifle tightly, whispering a prayer I didn't know I still remembered. It couldn't get in that way, not without burning itself alive. I clung to that thought, but the scuttling gave way to something worse. Pounding. The thing was testing the doors, ramming into them with unnatural strength, each blow a thunderous reminder that my refuge was only temporary. I raised the rifle and fired blindly toward the sound. My ears rang, and my shoulders screamed in protest from the recoil, but the pounding didn't stop. Then came the crash. The window shattered, glass raining across the floor. Its grotesque, elongated arm snaked through the opening, flailing, searching. I fired again, the shot deafening in the small room. The arm withdrew with an inhuman screech, but the reprieve didn't last. A new sound rose, a relentless, rhythmic pounding. Wood splintered as the creature battered the wall, its monstrous strength reducing the sturdy planks to tinder. I fired again and again, but it was useless. No matter how many bullets I put through the wall, the beast didn't stop. The door burst open, and there it was, hulking and terrible, its skeletal frame silhouetted against the storm. It lunged at me, faster than I could react, sending me crashing into the wall. Dazed, I watched as it approached. Its pale, distorted face twisted with something I could only describe as glee. Traps snapped shut on its limbs, but it tore through them as though they were paper. My breath caught in my throat as I fumbled for my last hope, the camera. It was now or never. I raised it, aiming with shaking hands, and pressed the shutter. I heard the familiar grind of gears, the mechanical whir of the Polaroid ejecting. But no flash. My heart sank. The flash didn't go off. I waited, knowing this was the end. My hands fell limp, and I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable. But nothing happened. The air was still, save for the faint crackle of the fire. Slowly, I opened my eyes, and froze. The creature stood motionless, its hand outstretched, inches from the camera. Its glowing eyes were gone, replaced by hollow, lifeless sockets. It wasn't reaching for me, it was reaching for the Polaroid. Cautiously, I grabbed the photo. My hands trembled as I looked at it, expecting to see the monster captured in its grotesque entirety. But the image was something else entirely, a gray, writhing haze in the rough shape of the beast. It moved, twisting and churning, as though trapped. Realization dawned. The photo had ripped something out of it. Its essence, its soul, whatever made it the abomination it was now confined to the photograph. The creature let out a low, guttural wail, its skeletal hands twitching as it reached for me. I knew what I had to do. With every ounce of strength I had left, I limped to the fireplace. The Polaroid hovered over the flames for a moment before I let it go. The instant it hit the fire, the creature screamed, a sound so piercing and primal it made my vision blur. Its skin bubbled and split, its body collapsing in on itself as it clawed desperately toward the hearth. But it was too late. By the time the photo had burned to ashes, the monster was nothing more than a heap of smoldering bones. I didn't wait. Grabbing my phone and keys, I fled into the storm, driving until the car gave out. The mud swallowed the tires a few miles out from town, but I didn't care. I limped the rest of the way, fueled by sheer terror and a will to survive. Now, I'm sitting in the home of a kind stranger, writing this. The police can't reach us because of the storm, and as I stare out their window, I see them, eyes, dozens of them, glowing in the darkness. They're watching me, curious, patient. I don't know if this message will save anyone, but heed my warning, stay out of the mountains. This is their land, and they're taking it back.
And that's it for today's story. But you know, the mysteries we uncover? They never really end, they linger, don't they? Waiting. Hiding. In the shadows. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, go ahead, hit subscribe, because trust me, you don't want to miss the next tale, the one that might just keep you up at night. Until then, stay curious, stay cautious, and hey, never stop questioning the world around you. See you in the next one.